Hello and welcome to Reproaction's Act and Learn webinar. Tonight's topic is very important. We're talking about stopping anti-abortion terrorism and harassment. So first, we'll introduce ourselves, your hosts. I'm Erin Matson, and I am one of the co-founders and co-directors of Reproaction, and I am based in Arlington, Virginia.
And I am Pamela Merritt. I'm the other co-founder and co-director, and I am based in St. Louis, Missouri.
Great, and we are so glad you're here. So a quick overview on the agenda. We're going to briefly introduce Reproaction, our organization that's hosting tonight. We're going to talk about the reality of anti-abortion terrorism and harassment. We're then going to move into discussions with our panelists. First, we'll take a big overview look at the state of clinic violence with duVergne, who's the director of the National Clinic Access Project, the Feminist Majority Foundation. Then we'll be joined by Dr. Cheryl Chastine, who's an abortion provider, and will share her personal experiences. After that, we'll talk to Michelle Colon, who's a clinic manager with Whole Woman's Health in San Antonio and a longtime clinic escort with the Pink House, the last abortion clinic in Jackson, Mississippi, in the state of Mississippi. We'll talk a bit about next steps, and then we'll have Q&A with our panelists and or with Pamela and myself. Now, I want you to know that for questions, feel free to chat those into the question box at any time, questions for the panelists. It will be a moderated Q&A at the end. The way to do that is to type them into the chat box. We also encourage you to live tweet during the session. Just use the hashtag Reproaction. So Reproaction, who are we? So Reproaction is a brand spanking new direct action group that's forming to increase access to abortion and advance reproductive justice. We're very proud of our left flank analysis that we bring to the table. We're calling for human rights and human dignity. We bring to the movement a willingness to hold folks on all sides of the aisle accountable, whether they're considered allies or opposition. So anyone who stands in the way of ensuring that every person has access to abortion, fully funded, period. And we also share a commitment to nonviolent direct action. So we are a direct action group. We use both online and offline action to accomplish our goals. And with that, I will pass it over to Pamela.
Thank you so much, Erin. So let's talk a little bit about the reality of anti-abortion terrorism and harassment. As we all know, unfortunately all too well, on November 27th, a gunman murdered 3 people and wounded 9 others inside a Planned Parenthood in Colorado Springs. 4 Planned Parenthood health centers have experienced arson attacks in the past 4 months, all after the release of deceitful and deceptive sting videos that demonize abortion providers and encourage violence. According to the Feminist Majority Foundation, 51.9% of abortion clinics experience Operation Rescue type tactics, including pamphlets targeting doctors and staff, wanted flyers and posters, personal information posted on the internet, posting of pictures of staff on the internet, demonstrations at doctors and staff's homes, and even stalking of doctors and staff. Incendiary speech encourages terrorism, violence, and harassment. While the gunman was still shooting on Friday, conservative commentator Eric Erickson tweeted and then later deleted that the left is upset the only people dying at Planned Parenthood are babies. As the gunman was still shooting at Representative Adam Kinzinger, a Republican from Illinois, criticized Planned Parenthood live on CNN. And actually, there are no 2 sides to a mass shooting. As Media Matters has documented, numerous right-wing figures have compared abortion providers to Nazis. It's common to hear abortion providers, people who have abortions, and pro-choice advocates called murderers. Here's the basics, and these are the facts. Abortion is basic health care and a basic right, period. Women need to be able to control whether and when to have children in order to have dignity and be equal, period. So enough is enough, and it's time to demand an end to abortion terrorism and harassment. Erin?
All right, great. So now I'm going to move on to the part of our panel where we'll talk with duVergne Gaines. duVergne, are you able to speak? I believe I've unmuted you.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you. You sound great. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. So by a bit of introduction for everyone, so duVergne Gaines is the director of the National Clinic Access Project at the Feminist Majority Foundation. She's based in Los Angeles, California. She is an expert in constitutional law. And before she took on the National Clinic Access Project, and even before she went to law school, she actually co-directed Rock for Choice for 7 years. She's appeared on Rachel Maddow and many other outlets, and we're just so pleased to have her with us tonight. So thank you for making the time to join us on this important topic, duVergne. First off, I'm going to suggest that we go through some of the material that you provided us first, and then with any time left over, I've got a few questions prepared. Does that work for you?
Sounds great.
Great. Okay, so I'll drive these slides and I'll hand it over to you to talk through.
Great. So I think just to provide any of our listeners with a little more information about the Feminist Majority Foundation's National Clinic Access Project. We've been around since 1989, and our work is sort of multi-layered. We work to monitor anti-abortion extremist violence nationwide, keeping tab on social media outlets, working in the field to identify extremists, and conducting extensive research into their money trail, connections, and more. In addition, we do a lot of work mobilizing community support. I spent a lot of time in Alabama this summer with many wonderful activists on the ground and independent providers there, as well as Planned Parenthood in that state, working to mobilize that community to prepare and protect themselves from an outside national anti-abortion extremist that came into the state to target clinics there in July. And we do that all over the country when a specific community is threatened, working with providers and leaders in those communities to fortify their infrastructure and prepare for assaults on their access to abortion and comprehensive reproductive health care. We also assist clinics with emergency grants, you know, whether they need to buck up their video surveillance cameras or other types of security measures, securing doors, bullet-resistant windows, check-in windows, doors, that kind of activity, which sadly, you know, we have to think about in light of this extraordinary threats and violence which target providers in this country. And we also provide security assessments, litigation assistance to defend doctors and providers that are being targeted, and also to go on the offensive, and have had several cases before the United States Supreme Court advancing reproductive access to reproductive health care and the measures legally we can turn to increase access and create buffer zones outside of clinics through injunctive relief. We also have and host with our colleagues across the country at the National Abortion Federation and Planned Parenthood Federation of America law enforcement briefings to assist clinics. So, and then last but not least, we provide strategic media outreach and public education. I just wanted to give people an idea of what we do before we launch into one of our most important activities, which is conducting surveys of clinic violence nationwide. And in 2014, we conducted our 13th National Clinic Violence Survey, and that survey is not just of Planned Parenthood facilities or National Abortion Federation affiliated facilities, but it's all three. It's independent, unaffiliated abortion providers and clinics in this country, as well as provide clinics that are associated with the National Abortion Federation, as well as facilities that are Planned Parenthood affiliates. And so it is the most comprehensive national survey on clinic violence that exists. And as you will see, according to this slide, we see in 2014 that 1 in 5 roughly clinics in the country continue to experience severe violence. And this survey precedes the ratcheting up of targeting clinics that we've seen this year with the release of the deceptive smear videos that were created by the Anti-Abortion Extremist Front, the Center for Medical Progress, quote unquote, led by Troy Newman and David DeLayden, and it was before this resulting flurry of arsons, threats, and increased harassment, and then of course the horrific shooting that took place in Colorado. So 1 in 5 before these events happen. And severe violence, just to be clear about what that includes blockades, physical blockades to the entrance, clinic invasions, bombings, arsons, chemical attacks in the form of butyric acid, physical violence, stalking, gunfire, bomb threats, arson threats, and death threats. So that's pretty serious. Now moving on, Erin, please help me keep track of the time. I don't want to overrun my welcome.
Absolutely. You're doing
now, this, we just went over this. It's one of the most comprehensive surveys in the country, and you can find this on our website, feminist.org, by going under our National Clinic Access Project and look at all the surveys we've conducted. And I also want to say, you know, often these facilities, like Planned Parenthood and majority of independent providers in this country, are providing all sorts of health care, not just abortion, although we should be unapologetic about providing abortion care. But these provide the gamut of, you know, even in some cases prenatal care, postnatal care. In fact, many of these facilities are the only health care facilities in their entire communities. So the fact that they're so heavily and relentlessly targeted is truly terrible. And of course, they provide services for low-income women and women in the most diverse communities in this country. So just to point that out. Now, what we saw in 2014 was 51% of clinics reporting that they are experiencing increased targeted intimidation and threats. 51.9% of clinics as compared to 26.6% in 2010. Now, what does that mean? That means that the individual targeting of providers like Dr. Chastine and others has started to skyrocket. What we're talking about is, you know, these wanted style posters that, as you may recall, listeners or not, many of the doctors that have been murdered in this country were murdered following the release and distribution of wanted posters like the Old West wanted posters that say dead or alive, wanted dead or alive, reward, you know, $500 for the head of so-and-so. So anti-abortion extremists use these posters, they throw them up, they put the pictures of the doctors on them, they say wanted or unwanted. Dr. Tiller had a similar poster used to target him. Of course, he was murdered in 2009. Dr. Slepian had a poster targeting him, a wanted style poster. He was murdered in 1998. Dr. David Gunn, the first physician to be that we know of murdered in this country, had a wanted style poster, and of course Dr. James Baird Britton had one. So this is a very serious threat, and we believe these to be, you know, true threats and wish they would be prosecuted as such. And you're seeing different versions and iterations of this type of flyer, the Killers Among Us leaflets. Also, you know, we're seeing the Call Out the Killers Among Us, another type of slogan being used by different groups, many of them associated directly with Operation Rescue. Of course, one of the leading advisors in the Center for Medical Progress videos. And so we go from 1.7% of clinics reporting the use of wanted posters to 7.7% in 2014. We go from 18.8% of clinics reporting the use of leaflets like Killers Among Us, where they the photographs of the physicians. They use incendiary, demonizing language to say these are, murderers. They identify where they work. Often they put up their home addresses and distribute them in their neighborhoods, where they do business, at the hospitals they may work at, their private offices, all over. And you can see that's increased from 18.8% in 2010 to 27.9%, which is a big jump. And then we'll see, cyber stalking. This is, I would say, if we were to take a measure of this, it's even greater now, following the release of these deceptive, highly edited videos. And then that's from 9% to 17.8%. You have abortiondocs.org. Again, it's an Operation Rescue affiliated website to create a massive database to stalk and intimidate and terrorize physicians nationwide. This Planned Parenthood of Colorado Springs website. They're cross-posted on the Abortion Docs page for the Colorado Springs Planned Parenthood site. So they're really using this information to target providers much more intensely, as we know. And then there's just the day-to-day harassment, intimidation of patients, those that accompany them, and staff, which again, 1 out of 4 women's health clinics experiencing daily. That's a huge number, and 67.8% of clinics just experiencing regular anti-abortion extremist harassment. So that is running through some of the disturbing statistics that we uncovered prior to the second half of 2016. And we will be conducting another survey in 2016, but the anecdotal evidence that we have is that independent providers and Planned Parenthood have seen threats, intimidation, and violence dramatically surge. And of course, this is tremendous concern, especially after the shootings in Colorado. I think I've probably run the gamut. Did you want to ask any questions, Erin?
duVergne, I have just one question for you. We've got 2 minutes before we're moving on to Dr. Chastine, and I just wanted to pose this question to you. What is your response? A lot of the pro-life movement leaders, as well as politicians who are opposed to Planned Parenthood, have responded to the tragic terrorism in Colorado Springs with this idea that Robert Deere was just a lone wolf, that the community really doesn't support this, that there's no violence problem. I'd just like to hear your brief response to that.
Erin, thank you so much for saying that, asking that question. I think that is the biggest fallacy being perpetrated against providers and in the law enforcement community. It is a terrible, terrible mistake to make, to say that these are lone wolves. We do not know whether or not Robert Louis Deere was in fact operating on his own or not. It is too early to tell, and we can only hope that the resources necessary to be used are being used to fully investigate his crime and his connections to the anti-abortion extremist network. There is, in fact, a network. It is very much thriving, alive and well. We know that the sort of frontline so-called moderate groups, which are extreme in their rhetoric, like Troy Newman, Operation Rescue, and others, are just one step away from those that pick up these weapons, if not directly involved. And I think We don't have the evidence immediately before us, but we know it's the shooter. For example, Scott Roeder said he knew Troy Newman. He went to these facilities because Operation Rescue essentially drew him a map, invited him to all the locations where he was able to stalk and terrorize Dr. Tiller prior to murdering him in his church. They had repeatedly targeted his church in Wichita. And that's what happens when extremists, when you quote unquote soften a target. The same is true of Paul Hill. He was in a network, the most violent network. He's the individual who picked up the gun, advocated justifiable homicide, and shot Dr. Britton in Pensacola, as well as a clinic escort, retired Lieutenant Colonel James Barrett. The same is true of James Kopp, in a very definitely involved in a network, and unfortunately only 2 of his other accomplices were brought to justice, but we suspect many others. Eric Robert Rudolph, the Olympic Park bomber who bombed a gay and lesbian bar and a clinic in Atlanta, and then went on and had the devastating bombing of the New Women, All Women clinic in Birmingham. There is no way he operated alone, although he's the only individual that's been brought to justice for those bombings. So these extremists run in packs. They are not lone wolves. They're very cunning. They have a manual. The Army of God manual is just probably but one that we know of. And they are absolutely usually operating together. And naturally, the incendiary and demonizing rhetoric is only helping fuel the fire.
Thank you so much, duVergne. Thank you very much for helping to dispel that myth, because it's one of the most potent ones that opponents of abortion are trying to use right now. And with that, I'm going to move it along to our next panelist and pass it back to Pamela, who's going to, I'm muting duVergne, and I am unmuting Dr. Chastine.
Thank you so much, Erin, and thank you so much, duVergne. So we have with us Dr. Cheryl Chastine, an abortion provider in Chicago, Illinois. And I'm just going to read a little bit of what the fabulous Renee Bracy Sherman wrote about Dr. Chastine for RH Reality Check back in March. A young provider, Dr. Chastine, represents the future of abortion care. She infuses reproductive justice values and transgender patient care into her practice. She has given up a lot, personally and professionally, to provide care to her patients throughout the Midwest and the Great Plains region, but she refuses to back down due to threats or intimidation. Instead, she fights back by providing the best possible care to her patients, who often travel long distances as additional political and economic hurdles are put in their way. Dr. Chastine, welcome, and thank you so much for joining our webinar.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. And I should clarify that I live in Chicago, but I travel to low access settings to provide abortion care there.
Thank you so much for that clarification. So if you could, let's start off, if you could just tell us a little bit about what inspired you to go into medicine and specifically providing abortion care.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I did not go to medical school to be an abortion provider, but I was always pro-choice, and so I got involved in Medical Students for Choice. And their messaging is very strong on there's a shortage of abortion providers, and providers are getting older and they're not being replaced. So they asked, if you don't do this work, then who will? And I felt like I didn't have a good answer for that. And so if I was needed to do the work, like if there were abortions that were not going to get done, if I didn't do them, then I was obligated to do them. So I sought out abortion training. The way that I became a provider full-time is directly attributable essentially to this anti-abortion terrorism. I had signed up for a list of providers who was willing to travel to places that didn't have their own provider, but I was working full-time in family medicine, and so the first people I heard from was, there's someone who's trying to get a clinic going again in Wichita, Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that Dr. Tiller had been killed there, and that was why. And so I thought, well, I need to. I don't feel safe exactly with this idea, but I don't think anybody else looking at this email will either. And so if these are patients that won't be able to access abortion care if I don't provide them, then I'm obligated to do that. If the only reason that I wouldn't provide these abortions is out of fear, then if I allow that to work, then that's giving Scott Roeder exactly what he wanted. You know, that's victory for terrorism. So I agreed to travel there, and the plan was that I was only going to go like maybe one weekend a month. But then Operation Rescue got a hold of my name, and they decided that if they could bombard me with pressure and unpleasantness in their usual way, then they might be able to stop the clinic from opening if they could get me to pull out of it. So they plastered my name and photograph and my office contact information and everything that they could find about me on their website and called up Chicago-based anti-abortion group, the Pro-Life Action League. So my office was bombarded with phone calls from anti-abortion people all across the country, and the Pro-Life Action League started picketing my practice, my family medicine practice in Chicago, and eventually it was made impossible for me to continue to work in family medicine and also provide abortion care. So given that choice, which I certainly have not anticipated going in, but given that that was the choice that I faced, I felt like again, if I let these tactics work by pushing me out of providing abortion care, then that just encourages them to do that to more people.
Wow. So, very true. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about what role abortion stigma plays in this harassment and in attempted intimidation.
Yeah, sure. So the reason that the fact that abortion is isolated from the mainstream of healthcare is the reason that the harassment is so effective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and because abortion is marginalized from the rest of healthcare, which is a function of abortion stigma, the rest of the medical community doesn't feel the obligation to stand up and support abortion providers. So, for example, the physicians that I was working with when I was still providing family medicine were not willing to stand up to these picketers. They essentially said that I was creating the problem and I needed to deal with it. The landlady that owned the clinic was similarly not supportive, and we see this all across through history, and with the decreasing number of abortions provided in hospitals, mm-hmm. and then with the difficulty that doctors are having in getting admitting privileges in order to meet the requirements that states are passing these laws where they know perfectly well providers won't be able to. This is all, you know, we don't want to deal with this abortion thing, and if you would just choose to not do it, then you wouldn't have to deal with these problems. You know, so abortion care is marginalized in much the same way as abortion providers are marginalized in much the same way as patients who seek abortion care find that abortion is marginalized from the rest of their healthcare experience.
Got it. So what do you think would improve things in the future, given everything that you've experienced and the kind of threats and harassment and intimidation that you've experienced just to provide care to your patients? What do you think would improve things in the future, and what role, if any, do you think direct action plays in ending harassment?
I think direct action can play a huge role in this, and I think really we can take a page from the anti-abortion movement in this. Antis have not been shy about picketing hospitals where abortions are provided, picketing hospitals where abortion providers have privileges, calling up the local hospital and threatening to take their families elsewhere if abortions continue to be provided there. And so I think that it would be wonderful to see people who are affirmatively pro-choice and are interested in and want to take direct action. I would love to see protesting of hospitals where abortion care is not provided for any reason, which is unfortunately most hospitals, but I would love to see people calling, I would love to see campaigns where people call the local hospital and ask, are you providing abortion care? If you're not, why not? I would like to take my family and my healthcare dollars to a place where this kind of life-saving care is being provided. Similarly, the same sort of action can be taken against lawmakers, or can be directed at lawmakers who are pro-choice but are not active about it, and/or lawmakers who are clearly anti-choice. I'd love to see protests and letter-writing campaigns and phone calls. I think that this is also something that you can do by working with your doctor. Talk to your doctor. Do you provide abortions? If you don't, why not? How do you feel about it? So I think in that sense, direct action has a lot of roles. There's been Lady Parks Justice has done this campaign of sending these lovely thank you postcards to abortion providers, and that's very meaningful also.
Awesome. I'm getting all fired up just with those suggestions.
Yeah.
Dr. Chastine, thank you so much for your work and for your dedication and for joining us. I'm going to hand it back over to Erin.
All right, great. And we've also got Michelle Colon joining us. Michelle, are you able to speak? I've just unmuted you.
Yes, can you hear me?
You sound great. Yep.
Okay.
So I'm going to introduce Michelle Colon. Michelle is a clinic manager at Whole Woman's Health in San Antonio, Texas. She just started her job there actually 2 days ago. So welcome and thank you for joining us at such a important time in your career. Also, you should know about Michelle, this photograph here, she has served as a clinic escort for 10 years, over 10 years. And she's a long-time member. She just moved from Mississippi to San Antonio. She's a part of the Health Defenders, a group of clinic escorts defending Mississippi's last abortion clinic in Jackson, Mississippi. So welcome, Michelle. My first question for you is really focused on your clinic escorting experience in Mississippi. That clinic has recently experienced vandalism. I'd love for you to tell our listeners more about that. What happened?
First of all, Erin, I'd like to say thank you. It's always a pleasure. I loved being I was movement. I love fighting for abortion rights and access. My time at the Pink House, everyone knows it as the Pink House or Jackson Women's Health Organization. Earlier this year, there was a convergence of national anti-groups, and they were Operation Save America, Survivors of the Abortion Holocaust, and the new, more militant group of young men, Abolish Human Abortion. They all came to Jackson at the end of March to quote-unquote storm the gates of hell. And when we think about clinic violence, we think about clinic violence in the traditional sense of, doctors being assassinated, bombings, arson, and things like that. Well, when groups such as those come to a town to attack a clinic, that's abortion, that's terrorism. So they came to quote-unquote terrorize our clinic. And the defenders, my fellow defenders and I, we have a lot of community support, and we were ready for them. However, they had gotten, like what antis do, they had gotten a hold of our schedule, and someone, came onto the property, destroyed 2 security cameras, jumped over a secured area where we had the generator is secured in a fenced-in area, and they attempted with a hatchet this individual we caught on the cameras before he destroyed the 2 cameras, jumped over into the secured area with this hatchet and had hammered at the generator and had destroyed some wires. Did not destroy the generator or cut off the power, but we know that that's what his intentions were, because if we had no power, we would not have been able to serve, the women who needed us that Monday morning. But what they didn't know is that at the last minute, we had changed the schedule. And there's an alarm or a warning alarm on the generator, and that alarm started beeping. And so from what we could tell from watching the videos, when he heard that alarm, he jumped back over the fence and kind of hid in the corner. He probably thought that was the major alarm for the clinic, but it wasn't. It was just the alarm for the generator. So, no one has been caught. We do have, we have our own personal ideas as to who it was. It was no coincidence when you have Jeff White and you have Rusty and Cal and you have Toby and T. Russell Hunter and all of those guys in your city. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to get what went down and who was behind it. When individuals such as these make remarks and they manipulate videos and photos and make posters of providers, and when they call people murderers and things like that, they are terrorists. They are terrorizing clinics and providers. And also politicians are, what they do as far as making these erroneous laws and things like that. That's terrorism. That's terrorism against clinics. So that's what went down in Jackson earlier this year.
Great, thank you for sharing that with us in detail. Now, my next question for you, actually, I want to flip to your work, your new work at Whole Woman's Health in San Antonio, Texas, and really focus actually on the positive, because we've had so much negativity as a community, seeing the violence happening around the country, and of course the tragic murders in Colorado Springs. But you're a clinic manager now, and I'd love for you to talk about at least details that you're able to share publicly. I understand if there are some that you're not. What steps you're taking so that you're able not only just to keep everyone safe, but also to help your patients know that they are being cared for in a supportive environment, to help make their abortion experience as positive as possible, even in spite of all of this terrible stuff happening because of the anti-choice movement.
Sure. Well, Whole Women's Health is committed to providing compassionate and respectful, care to women in making their, own health decisions. So, we're fighting just like, so many other clinics and providers all over the country. We're going to continue providing that care to families, the Texas women and girls and their families. And we're holding strong. We definitely believe that, politicians are not helping the women of Texas. They are really heaping a huge injustice on women and their families because, women are having to travel more than 5 hours, round trip to get a safe, legal abortion care. And so these politicians, their interference has only caused, many physicians to have to travel longer distances to provide care for the women and families of Texas. And so we are, we're definitely remaining committed to ensuring that all women of Texas receive and have access to safe abortion health care, despite all of the incessant laws that continue to pass in the state.
Michelle, you are an inspiration. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm going to encourage everyone to type your questions for Michelle, for Dr. Chastine, for duVergne in the chat box. And Michelle, I'm going to put you on mute again, and I'll unmute you for our Q&A that we'll go into soon. All right? Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you, Erin.
All right. So with that, I'm going to move into our next step. So this is a personal plea to everyone on this call to please, if you haven't already done so, to sign up for our alerts at reproaction.org. and to follow us on social media. We are Reproaction on Facebook, we're Reproaction on Twitter, and we're Reproaction on Instagram. And the reason why we so want you to plug into us online, if you are not already, is we want to be sure to notify you of everything that we're doing to combat anti-abortion terrorism and harassment. Just to give you a sense of a few things on the pike, as well as things that we've done in the immediate past. One, we are on the brink of launching a new digital campaign against pro-life hate, and we are very excited to share that with you. Again, please be sure you're following us on all of our accounts so that you can see that. That will be coming out very, very, very soon. We also conducted a vigil outside the Supreme Court last week, both to commemorate the lives lost and the people injured at the Colorado Springs Planned Parenthood shooting, but also to call for an end to anti-abortion terrorism and harassment, to provide a space for activists to come together. As a result of that, we are doing a few in-person strategy sessions in a few local areas, in the DC local area where I'm based and in the St. Louis local area where Pamela is based, to really talk about what we can do together as groups, as activists, to take direct action to call for an end to this extreme violence and harassment and terrorism. So there's a lot on the pike. If you want to be in the know about vigils or events that we have planned, if you want to be reached out to in the event that we may have a strategy session in your area, if you want to know more about our new campaign and how you can help, please just sign up online. The other thing that I'd like to do is encourage you to save the date for our next webinar. It's going to be on Wednesday, January 13th, from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. We do these Act and Learn webinars every month, and they're designed to do exactly what we're doing tonight, to dive deeper in topics, to share strategies with one another across the country about what's working, what's not working, and more. So the topic is still to be determined. There's a number of things that we're looking at, but if you have things that you suggest, that a webinar that you think would be really helpful, or something that you want to learn more about, or something that you'd like to hear more from someone, please feel free to share that in the chat box or to email us after this webinar. We're very open to your feedback. So with that, I'm going to move it over to the panel discussion, and Pamela will moderate that, and I'm going to unmute Michelle and duVergne and Dr. Chastine, and Pamela will help direct those questions and who might answer which.
Thank you so much, Erin. So this is exciting. We've already got a ton of awesome questions, so keep them coming. We're going to be doing this Q&A for the next 15 minutes. First question is from Morgan, and I'm going to actually direct this question to duVergne. Morgan says that a new book, Living in the Crosshairs, talks about strengthening legal avenues for abortion providers. Do speakers agree that this would help? Where do we start with this, state by state and or nationally? For example, improving FACE.
Gosh, that's a great question. Yes, we need to improve. We need to strengthen. That's a wonderful book by David Cohen and his co-author. And the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act absolutely needs to be amended. But in addition, we need better state laws, because Congress is not looking so good right now when it comes to pushing forward some progressive legislation. Or there are laws on the books federally that we hope will be brought to bear in full force against anti-abortion extremists and terrorists. And those are the same laws we use to prosecute any terrorist. In addition, I hope there's a number of initiatives underway right now to present model legislation for states across the country to beef up their legislative options for protecting providers and patients in on the state level. And I think that we need to do both. And I think we're going to see already in some places like, we're seeing the introduction of proactive, offensive state legislation that we hope will get passed and start to bolster states where we can do so with friendly state legislatures and governors.
Thank you. So we have another question. This one is from Amanda, and it's a question for anyone. How can clinics better monitor protesters? Do you have a list of protester groups for those of us who don't pay good attention to the protesters? Michelle, did you want to take a first stab at that?
I can speak in my capacity as being a security director and pink house defender at the clinic in Mississippi. And I know duVergne is probably sitting on her hands right now because she's wondering, like, oh my God, what is she going to say? What we did was we did what was always told not to do, and we engaged. And so we asked them their names. They, follow doctors, and they know where doctors go. They know where their doctors live. They know where their doctors' children are. We asked them their names. We knew where, we knew where they lived. We knew where they went to church. It's not like we stalked them, but we knew that. And there's also a wonderful network that I cannot praise enough. It's called Clinic Connections. It's a closed network, but very supportive network of clinic defenders and escorts all over the country. And they have been, members of that particular network have been extremely, extremely helpful, I know, for the Pink House and other independent providers as far as having people all over the country who can take photographs and video, and they know who's coming where and things like that. So we have helped each other and supported each other in making, in quote unquote, unmasking the antis. And so, case in point, when Matt Tringali, who was an anti out of North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, we had seen videos of him, and we were prepared for him. We knew what he was going to do. And so when he planned to come to Jackson, we were so ready for him that we shut him down after the first day. He had said nothing the next day. The next 2 days he were there. Now, I cannot say that that's going to work at every clinic. By all means, respect what your provider has in place. For us, we were given, we were given a lot of leeway, and it worked for us. And so, and that's with all of them, whether it's AHA or all of them. We know their names. I mean, so they pretty much didn't have a whole lot of power over us in the sense as far as, with their rhetoric, because we were able to turn the tables on them. And one of the ways which really was really funny for us was we took the AHA logo and we took it and we started doing it, and we put PhD for Pink House Defender, and that really, really ticked them off. And so now when they come out to the clinic, especially the locals, they don't come wearing their paraphernalia. They will not wear their paraphernalia because we have shirts that have PhD. We kind of took their logo, so to speak, and we kind of made it pink, and we put the Pink House Defenders, and we also took the initials, and I asked for suggestions from other defenders and escorts across the country. What does AHA mean to you? They call themselves abolish human abortion. We call them annihilate her autonomy.
Huh. That is so awesome. Thank you so much. That is fantastic. So did anybody else have anything they wanted to add on that topic? Hearing nothing, I'm going to move right on to the next question. Thank you for that awesome breakdown, Michelle. So this one I'm actually going to give to Dr. Chastine. So the question is from Robin, and I think this is interesting to get a provider's perspective on this, but are there any suggestions for clinic escorts to help patients more?
Yeah, so that's a great question because the patients, the escorts are wonderful. They're super helpful for the patients, but the patients do still come in rattled. So I can talk to you about a couple of things that we've been trying at my clinic that were kind of my idea that I believe the patients have been responding positively toward. So the first thing that we've been doing is giving the patients headphones to wear while they're on their way in and out. And where I'm currently practicing, we have a 24-hour in advance in-person consent. So the patients come twice, so they go past the antis 4 times. So I bought some sound blocking earmuff things, which the patients, and we explain on the phone to the patients, you know, the escorts may hand you this and it'll help to drown out the antis. And so the patients seem to like that. And we just have a few sets, like maybe one for each escort. And then I'm still working on some sets that will play music also, and the patients can turn that up. But I think that that's one thing, because a lot of times the patients are upset by is the things that are yelled at them. So if they can avoid that, then that's helpful. The other thing that I've been encouraging patients to do that seems to be helpful is for them to take out their phone and hold it up like they're videotaping the antis. And I tell them, you know, you don't even have to actually record, but if you want to just record, and then you can maybe delete it right afterward. But something about knowing that they're being watched the antis don't like that, you know. And I mean, they know that they don't like it, and that's why they they know that nobody likes it, and that's why they videotape other people themselves. So I think that those are a couple of options.
Good stuff. Yeah, that's great. Great feedback. And then I'm just curious to hear also from Michelle if you have any kind of advice for clinic escort.
First of all, I want to commend clinic escorts and defenders, because you know what? When they decide to go out and stand and protect and defend their clinic, they have already engaged. And so I just want to say to my fellow escorts and defenders out there, you know, you're a hero as well. You all are heroes as well. And so keep up the good work. I think there are other things that escorts and defenders can do. Again, I do want to say that, you know, by all means, respect what your provider has in place. One of the other things that have been very effective for us is that we have little boom boxes, and Diane had bought one of those wireless speaker thingies, like what the antis bring out, voice amplification thingies. And so we had that this summer, and basically we play classic rock and we play social conscious music. And so when the antis get revved up, especially the traveling anti-circus, when they come with their bullhorns and, you know, and all the little kids, and they start singing and playing instruments, we put on music like Fight the Power, and of course every provider's theme is Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. We won't back down, and we play Twisted Sister. We're not going to take it. So we play that, and you know, and yeah, and we play it loud. When they get loud, we get a little bit louder. So we do that, and we always, you know, as the patients are coming in, we always say, you know what, hold your head up high. Just keep walking. You know, they cannot bother you. We try to keep them, you know, try to keep their anxiety level down. And, you know, they do. They hold their heads high. And like the doctor said previously, you know, we have a 24-hour waiting period, so they have to come back, you know, twice. And, you know, that first time when they come, there's all these emotions, they're scared and whatnot. But that second time when they come, their heads are held high and they're more defiant. And, you know, they just tell them it's none of your business and leave me be and things like that. So yeah, they don't like to be photographed. The antis don't like to be photographed and videotaped. And when you start, you know, saying things to them about like, oh yeah, I saw you in the store. Why didn't you speak to me then? I mean, you call me all kind of names out here. It kind of shames some of them. I'm not saying all of them, but some of them. So I think the more support that clinics receive, and I, you know, for Mississippi, the community has really come out. The community around us, the neighboring businesses. I'm not saying that those businesses and those neighbors are particularly pro-choice, but they got a taste last summer as to what providers all over the country endure when Creative Equal came out and stood outside of their businesses with the fetal porn and blocked entrances to their businesses in an attempt to shame them and get them riled up at us. Well, it backfired on them. And so the community not so much joined with us, but it was one of those things that, oh no, you're not going to do this to my business. And so we kind of had to, they kind of had to join us in a sense. And so when things are happening, when antis would come, we would make sure they knew, and things like that, like, so-and-so's coming, just be prepared and things like that. So, after the vandalism, the quote-unquote terrorist attack, the terrorist attack on the Pink House in March, the entire community, the entire neighborhood of Fondren is really watching out for the clinic, which is support that the clinic has never had. And so we're really, really happy. And I wish that every provider could have that, that support. But it's going to take, yes, dismantling the stigma and being proud to say the word abortion and going to these businesses and everybody knows us. They all know us. We frequented the businesses when I was there. And so they know who we are. They know who the Pink House defenders are. They know who the staff, is. And so they look out for the staff. When they see one of the doctors in the coffee shop or what have you, they're always looking out. And so it's things like that. We introduce our doctors to the various people in the proprietors of the businesses, because these, the clinic was in that community before a lot of those other businesses. So if anyone is going to leave, it's not going to be, it's not going to be the Pink House. So
that's right.
So for the defenders and escorts out there, I just have to say, kudos to them. They are extremely brave, and they get up and they endure so much because they take the brunt of it, and which is okay, because I think as a former defender, I think it's okay. We would rather have them yelling and screaming at us than yelling and screaming at our doctors, our staff, and our patients.
Thank you so much. So that actually opens up, I think we've got about 2 more minutes on the webinar. We try to be punctual and end on time. But I think that opens up a good final question for all of our wonderful guests tonight, which is, what are your thoughts? I know we heard from most of you about counter-protesting and that kind of work in clinic defense, but just if each of you could talk about what makes a counter protest effective and what your thoughts are on counter protesting, and we'll start with duVergne.
Well, I would say we don't like to call it counter protesting as much as what we call it, clinic defense and escorting and all of these terms, but it's all the same thing. I think people need to establish a direct relationship with the abortion providers in their communities and go ahead and do things like escorting or clinic defense, and once again build this grassroots movement so we can take back this debate, take back our bodies, and make a difference in this country on this issue, because we have, it's just unconscionable what's going on. And I think we, the Feminist Majority Foundation, got started mobilizing clinic defense in Los Angeles. That's the genesis of this project. Forgive me for using a biblical term, but I think it's essential. And I think that these embattled facilities need it. They need direct contact with the community, and more people need to be getting directly involved. And we wholeheartedly support that work.
Got it. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to add, Dr. Chastine or Michelle?
This is Michelle. I totally agree with duVergne. I think we need to we need to be more involved. And if there is a quote unquote positive thing that has come out of the tragedy that happened in Colorado, is that more people are reaching out to escort and defender groups across the country and wanting to escort, they want to get involved. And even some of the more seasoned activists, people from, what I like to call the old heads, are coming out of the woodwork. They're just like, man, I can't believe we have to do this again. So that's a good thing. The other thing is, it's unfortunate, is that for some reason this younger generation, and I hate to say that because it's not like I'm all that old, but people who are not aware of the seriousness of anti-abortion terrorism, those who are not in the movement, they have seen now. This is something that they have seen because it was all over the news. And so now people have a new awareness. You know what I'm saying? It's like they've been enlightened, so to speak. So I think, we need to continue to talk about it. This is why we fight. This is why we do what we do. This is why I considered myself a defender, why we called ourselves the Pink House Defenders, because this is what we had to do. And these people, whether they're the pseudo sidewalk counselors, whether they're so-called self-proclaimed street preachers, whether they're the lawmakers and the politicians, all of them play a role in folks picking up guns and doing these things, to abortion clinics and harassing and stalking providers. They are just as responsible because they, A, are either spouting off incorrect rhetoric, or B, they're not saying anything, they're not checking these folks on information like that. So again, those are some of the things. That was my experience in Mississippi, and I can tell you from personal experience, if you don't know us, if you don't know me, that it has worked for us. And so, I'm very honored to have been a part of that and have that relationship with that clinic. And I'm extremely honored to be a part of the Whole Women's Health family. And we are extremely grateful to the Center for Reproductive Rights for, representing us in the cases, which again, in my opinion, yes, that's a form of terrorism. As far as lawmakers making these laws to intimidate providers and trying, because they can't just outright ban abortion, but okay, we can't outright ban it, but yeah, let's go ahead and let's make all these laws and make it more difficult.
That's a subject for another webinar.
Yeah, that's a form of terrorism. So we don't need to shy away. We need to call it what it is, and we need to call these people out. And I don't, it doesn't matter who it is. So just want to say thank you to the Center for Reproductive Rights, and again, Whole Women's Health is they're not backing down. They're going to continue to provide superior care to the women and families of Texas.
Thank you so much, and we are always encouraged to hear that. And so, Dr. Chastine, I'll give you the last word.
I don't think I can add anything else to that. Thank you, Michelle.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah. I'm totally fired up. I do want to, I know we're going a little bit over, but I cannot log off and let everybody go without saying that there are lots of comments just wanting to express their gratitude and thanks to duVergne, to Dr. Chastine, to Michelle for the work that you do, and that they are, so grateful and so encouraged and so proud to be a part of a movement with all y'all in it. So I wanted to make sure that we pass that on behalf of our attendees who left those messages. Thank you so much for your wisdom and your information, and for being a part of our webinar. We're very grateful.
And Erin, thank you so much. And Reproaction, we're so excited to have you all with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this work and for having me.
Thank you. So that's it, and so we hope that people sign up for our alerts, that if you have a question or feedback, I know there were a couple of questions we didn't get to, please feel free to shoot us an email, Erin@reproaction.org or Pamela@reproaction.org, and we will see y'all in the streets. Thank you for joining. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.